Hey guys, this is Mike with UTV Stereo. Just wanted to make a quick video and show you guys the second battery kit we have for the Can-Am X3 and our new upgraded mount. The kit, when you buy it, is going to come with the new mount, an extra battery, isolator, all the bolts and hardware, and the wiring you need to put it in. There are going to be some tools you're going to need to put this kit in as well. Things like silicone, zip ties, wire cutters, a torch to shrink heat shrink tubing, or a lighter will work. Drill bits, an extension for drill bits is nice to have but not necessary. Marker to mark holes with, 10 mil socket with extension, Phillips, pry bar may be necessary, and I'll show you that why later. And then all the hardware and tools you need to remove your seats. And then also a hood prop is also very helpful. So if you want to come on over to the car, we'll show you how to do this and we'll get started. Alright, so as you can see, I've already got the car taken apart, seats are out of it and everything. What we're going to start first with is disconnecting the primary battery. So you always start with your negative terminal. And make sure you save these bolts that come out of the primary battery because we'll reuse those later. And also this rubber boot can come off for now because it's not going to be reused. Okay, so now the battery is disconnected. I'm try to pull all this stuff out of the way. Some cars you'll notice that have a lot of zip ties and stuff tying things together. It just depends on how they were put together at the factory. This one didn't come with a whole lot, but if there are a lot in there, I like to cut them off. You know, even these guys up here, because what'll end up happening is it'll make laying the wires in the new positions a whole lot easier. You know, and even so far as this, you know, these guys back here, I'll take them off as well. And then just kind of figure out a way to push them out of the way for now. Okay. So now what you're going to do is you're going to take your 10 mil socket on your impact. You're going to take these bolts out here. Now there is a chance, I've seen this a lot in these cars, the riv nuts underneath here that are in the tube will start to spin. If they do, I'll show you a trick. What we do is we take a pry bar and wedge it between here and there and put pressure on there as we're turning the bolt. And what that does is it stops the riv nut from turning the bottom and allows the bolt to release. Okay. And that's probably the noisiest part of the project. Now you go ahead and take the factory mount out and set it aside because you won't need it anymore. Okay. When you take the factory battery out, it has two little nuts in it on either side. These little guys, make sure you don't lose those because you will need those later on. Okay. So now you take your new battery out of the box. It'll come with new hardware and everything. Just set those to the side for now. These are sealed batteries, so you can tip them upside down if you need to. It's not a big deal. Take the covers off of them. And what you're going to do is, let's see, the new accessory battery is going to set towards the inside of the car. Your original stock battery is going to sit towards the outside of the car. And the reason we do it that way is for the wiring, you know, to make sure everything can reach. Okay, so what you do is you set everything in there, you know, just loose to start. You take your mount, set it in there. And then what I like to do is I'll take the hood prop and set it in here. And just give it a good wedge in there just to hold everything in place while you mark and drill your holes. So this is where the extension for the drill bit comes in handy. but like I said, it's not necessary. If you don't have any kind of extension for your drill bit and you can't get back here to this back hole, you can just mark it, and then take everything back out and drill it later. So push down on everything, make sure everything's seated. You want to make sure everything's pushed over as far as you can towards the passenger side of the vehicle, and tight in there with the prop rod. And drill your holes. Okay, now that your holes are drilled, pull your prop rod back out. And you can take the mount back out as well. And all this stuff can come right back out again so that you can clear room to do all your wiring. And as you can see just how easy those things fall out. Okay. Now the other part that comes with this kit is what they call a battery isolator. And what this part does is it separates the two batteries when the vehicle's not on. So that way, if you have a draw on your accessory battery, like your stereo's on, your lights are on, whatever's playing, everything will run off of this battery, and we'll leave this one alone to start the car when you need to go somewhere. So, and then once the car's started, this thing turns on and connects the battery so this will recharge. And we mount these things up here in the corner of the box, just like this, with the smaller terminals facing up. Kind of hard to see in the dark there. So, and all these holes are the same size. So once you've drilled your holes for your isolator, what we're going to go ahead and do is start wiring the isolator and prepping it to get it mounted. So what you're going to do is loosen up the two small screws. They're 8 mils on the isolator itself. And again, try not to lose any of this hardware because it likes to go flying too. And then you'll take your isolator harness here, which is the blue and black 12 gauge wire, and you'll put them on the isolator just like that, so they'll loop around the bottom side of it. Okay. And then you'll put all your washer, lock washer, and nut back on. And make sure those are good and tight, but they don't have to be death grip tight. So now what we'll do is we'll take the 2 shorter bolts that come with the kit. And you should get two shorter bolts and 4 washers. There's going to be a washer on either side. Take all that apart here. And what we'll do is put a washer on each bolt, put it through the bracket here, where you drilled your hole already, and then put it up against the back wall. And then what we're going to do is we're going to reach around the back side of this thing here, put the other washer on the back side, and then put the nut on. And once the isolator is mounted, we can route our wire, our trigger wire, and just get that out of the way. And this guy is actually going to go all the way up to the accessory post up in the front of the center console. Now if you have a 2-seat car, you'll already be at that point. 4-seat cars, you have to take the front seat out to get to it. So this is going to get connected up here, and we'll show you that in a minute. Okay. Now the next part to this that's actually very important, that we actually get a lot of questions about, is the power wires. What do we do with the power wires? Basically, what we're going to do peel this tape off of here. Peel that off there. And take your wire cutters. And you can see there's a spot where the two wires end and it goes into the connector. That's where you want to cut it. And it might take a few bites depending on your cutters. And you won't need that anymore. So go ahead and take the old or the factory heat shrink off of there. And then you'll have two separate wires. Each one of these is going to go to their own individual battery now. And what I like to do is I'll take this, the loom here, cut it back a little ways. That way you can leave it on there and you still have plenty of space to work with. So now you're going to take your utility knife and cut the insulation back. Be very careful doing this. If you feel more comfortable with wire strippers, do it that way. Can't tell you in 20 years of doing this how many times I've cut myself open doing this. So be very careful. And then do the same thing with the other wire. Okay, so now you're going to grab your ring terminals and your heat shrink. So the heat shrink's going to go on your wires. Yeah. Just kind of slide it back as best you can. And this is kind of why I cut the loom back a little bit on this one. And actually, I need to cut a little more. Okay, so now that we've got those prepped, we're going to take our crimpers, and if you have 4-gauge crimpers you can use those, or however you want to crimp the wire, and crimp the connectors onto the ends of the wires. Like that, and give them a good tug at the end. Make sure that they're on there tight. And you really can't crimp these too tight. And I like folding them over like that because it just tends to make everything a whole lot tighter. Okay, so now that those are on there, you're going to take your silicone, and we use 100% pure clear silicone for this. And you're just going to put a little dab on the end here, just to cover up the exposed copper. And what that does is it seals all the moisture and everything out, so that way it won't corrode. It also keeps battery acid and all the other stuff, all the other nasties out of there. Okay, then we'll slide our heat shrink over it and just kind of push it up as far as you can. Just like that. Then we take our torch, or you can use a lighter or whatever, or a heat gun, and shrink your heat shrink. And just go all over it, make sure you get it shrunk all the way around. Alright, so now that we got those done, try to push everything back out of the way again. The other thing I like to do with these when I'm doing them is I will take, let's see, I'll take my 10 mil and I'll loosen up this connector on the starter solenoid and I'll just spin it around. You don't want to take it off because you don't want to misplace any wires. There's a couple of different things that connect to this. You don't want to misplace any of them. But if you just loosen it up and spin it around a little bit, it tends to make the wires lay a lot nicer. And then you just make sure you tighten that back up. And then put the cover back over it. So now what we're going to do, we're going to set both of our batteries up here again. Make sure you keep all your bolts out of the way. We can't go too far in yet because we need to make sure we get the positive terminals connected. What that's going to involve is these two blue wires that come with the kit. You're going to notice there's two different lengths. The longer one goes for the batteries furthest away from the isolator, and then the shorter one goes for the one closest. And we're going to take and connect those two wires to our batteries. So I usually like to take the smallest ring terminal and put it on top next to the bolt, and the biggest one next to the battery. And just kind of snug them up for now, just get them on there. And be careful, if you need to, wrap these with electrical tape or something, but just make sure they don't make contact with the other side of the battery. And now for the new battery, we're going to do the same thing, only with the new battery's hardware. So, and then we have the other positive wire. This wire is the one that feeds up to the distribution block in the center console. And I like to tuck this thing around back behind all of this, just because it makes things a lot cleaner once the batteries are in. And like I said, just snug it up. You don't have to get it death grip tight just yet. Okay.
She's danced, and I just couldn't get it. So I refused to call her mother. I called her lady.
So now we have those on there. We need to put the batteries back, and we need to make sure that the wires are facing the correct direction so that the mount can install. So once you get them probably about 3/4 of the way in, you're going to have to stop and tighten the bolt. All while keeping in mind where those negative terminals of those batteries are so you don't have any problems. And sometimes this can be a little bit of fun. But you want to make sure these get tight. Okay. There's that one. That guy. Okay. So now we'll slide the batteries all the way in. Okay. So now that we have that done, we can take our mount and slide it into place. Okay, and once the mount is in place, we can take and put our wires up here. Takes a 14mm wrench to take these loose. And you could take these off before you start the install too. It doesn't really matter what time you do them. And also, now's a good time to check to make sure these nuts on the isolator are tight. Sometimes they ship a little loose. That's not a big deal, you just snug them up. And you'll put your ring terminal, your washer, and your lock washer and nut back on. Now if you have battery tenders or anything like that that you're wanting to install, there's a good time to put those on as well. You can put your positive terminals for your battery tenders on each one of these and they'll feed each battery independently. And then once we get to the ground part, I'll show you where we can put the ground wires for tenders as well. Alright, so now what we're going to do is install the bolts that hold the mount in. Now you're going to find you have 2 washers and a nut with each bolt, just like we did for the isolator. And what I've found the easiest way to do this is to get your prop rod again, put it back in place over here, and that will actually help line up the hole that you drilled down here. Okay, and now from underneath the car, what I'll do is I take the bolt and the washer, just like that, and I will put it up from underneath the car into the mount. There's a hole in the skid plate that you'll see that lines up right with that hole. This may take a little bit. Sometimes I got to reposition this thing. Now what you're going to do is you take your washer and the other nut and just put it on there and run it down. Now I have tried doing this both ways, with putting the bolt through the top and the bolt through the bottom, and the bolt through the bottom actually ends up being a whole lot easier. that's done, go ahead and take the hook prop back out. And we'll start looking at getting the bolt in from the back. So you take your second bolt. And just reach in from the back here. Alright, once that's through the mount, you take your washer, put it on the bolt, and this part is probably by far the most fun part of putting one of these in. The nut. Take your socket and extension so you can reach back there and tighten it up. Okay, so now the batteries aren't going anywhere. All your positive wires are done. And your trigger wires are done. So now all we have left to do is hooking up your ground wires. The kit will come with this extra ground jumper. And what we're going to do is tie the two batteries together on the ground terminals. And you make sure you pay attention where your grounds are and make sure they both ended up in the same spots. And also, if you have battery tenders that you hooked up here already, you'll have two ground wires. Hooking them up to this battery is a perfectly fine thing to do, and it's what we normally do. And you just put both of them under that same terminal. And I'll usually start these with a screwdriver because a lot of times that nut will be a little fun to try to grab, and then I'll tighten them with a ratchet. Okay, and then we're going to take our factory harness here and just kind of bend it around however you can to try to make it lay flat with this other wire here. Now you may get a little bit of a spark when you put all these together. That's normal. And you want to make sure that none of your wires or anything come forward at this point, because if they do, they may run into your seat when you push the seat all the way back. But with everything the way it is right now, the seat should move all the way back without any trouble. So now what we're going to do, clean up all your tools a little bit here, and we're going to zip tie up some wires just to make things look a little nicer. So you see you have this giant bundle over here. I usually like to come through here with a zip tie. And just tie everything up. You know, make sure you leave enough slack on things so that way, you know, nothing gets pulled taut or anything like that. Now the zip tying, you know, is not necessary, but you know, I just feel it makes it look a lot nicer. And that's it for the back of the vehicle. So if you want to come with me real quick, we'll take a look at the front and I'll show you how to hook that up. All right guys, we're back up in the front of this Can-Am. I'm going to show you where to hook up the isolator wires. These are the trigger wires that are going to turn on your isolator to make sure that your battery's charged when the vehicle's driving. So on your terminal, you've got 3 connectors. You've got your ground, your constant hot, and a switched hot. What we're going to do is we're going to hook the black wire that we ran up from the isolator up to this ground wire. So one thing I like to do when I get in here, once I get this ground wire hooked up, is I will just tap the blue wire to the constant to make sure I hear the click of the isolator. If you hear that click, that means the isolator is functioning. So then we'll take the accessory post, which is down below that constant, off, and we'll hook up the blue wire to the accessory. And then just tighten it all up. And then you just take your cover plate and put it back over the wires. So now every time you start the car, you should hear the click of that isolator. If you ever don't hear that click, that means you need to get in and troubleshoot things, because that means your batteries are not charging. So this was Mike with UTV Stereo, just showing you our new X3 mount, or X3 battery, second battery kit mount.